아니 좀 된데 최소 송바 탐제 송기 차셔를 아니 로이 동아 세와 제바 이나양 로이 동아 매직부 지금 진주를 소환하시 송기 차셔를 양 라라가 아니 로이 동아 세와 제바 이나양 아니 로이 내게 돈에 친구들라我那几早我们那些出来情感的了，俺他开始说，那里啥点用老不老，谈真那个谁也没去过，是我他谈真是话呢，他我他说的。年纪了，过过的，这话题的谈真那个设备，你买起不是个他是个是吧？我因让谈真那个设备买起不的，可是作为那些社会设备买起不的，可是是呢，当不等于个他的，等于当不他的多别了的是，我因让。看见那个时候嘛，就不，什么点着他当茶园了，我听着为，俺那当把点中个就是大话题，俺那大家个谈你就叫做三话，俺那大家个谈你当茶话一张，什么点着他当茶园了，我听着为，俺那。点中就当把点中当点中对不对？教授的，俺那中点点的马车的，俺那到好像我们路当，俺上也讲，爬爬啦，到查爬啦，说我给也山那么的，俺那其他点了爬爬去，俺那点了爬爬那些去，俺那空的去年去不去用啊？小钱的，他都是不的啊。
So the teacher, Jelama Tsongkhapa, has said in a verse that although all of the teachings, all of the speech of the Buddha, all of the parts of that are like medicine that are intended to relieve the sufferings of sentient beings, although all of the teachings of the Buddha are like that, are like this medicine, the root or the essence of those teachings is this teaching of dependent origination as emptiness and emptiness as dependent origination. This is sort of like the heart of the teachings of the Buddha. And so this path of teaching the profound view in conjunction with dependent origination, teaching emptiness as meaning dependent origination and dependent origination as meaning emptiness, this is the view, or this is what is able to overcome the grasping at true existence. This is what is able to actually get at the root of why we are cycling in samsara. samsara. So this teaching dependent origination as emptiness and emptiness as dependent origination, by teaching in this way, it is able to simultaneously eliminate both extremes, the extreme of utter non-existence or the extreme of existence by some kind of intrinsic nature. So he continues in this prayer requesting to be able to understand like those masters who properly followed after and explicated the Buddha's teachings. So the spiritual sons like Nagarjuna and Aryadeva and Buddha Palita and Chandrakirti, Tsongkhapa requests, please bless me to be able to understand like they did this intent of the Buddha, the most profound teaching. So here he's praising the Buddha's teaching and specifically that of dependent origination and emptiness as being like the root of all of the teachings, the essence of all of these teachings, and makes requests to be able to understand like those spiritual sons who properly commented and explicated the meaning of the Buddha's teachings.
Oh yeah, that tenderly, tenderly, Namsha, Tomba Tenjungu, Tombaki, and it has shown Tendi Tobaki Ma, Shenujua Chabala, Takazantini, Kasore, Kasampa, Penja Chitabatan, that didn't shoot you tell her. Jumden, Tomba Tenjungu to Sumba Tini. Any 2 year ambo, Kazan, Takab to she saying, but 2 year ambo, Deba Shana Chabato, Pabi Pajilana Mebanga Batella, that can't do soon as she won. Tanzin Chua dancer, but he Kella Joy, Chawamali Jibuko, Setakazan shop to she had or then the Shandu Majon, what Deba change, Wajelan is singing, Mudijana Jambi Chicks, what the Kazan shop to she had. 강도 순회 사용가나 아니 강도 순회 사례가 강진법 뭐 강도 순회 아니 지원함 아니 탄진의 정화 때 맞춰 가려서나 균전 강도 순회 때 아니 균전때 순위 도지 지신이라 제비 로진 추위 지원함 스타트인데 되게 로진 추마 라시지原라시지 추와 라시지 메나 메메 빨리 때는 메봐 라시지 여바당 예배 제반 미셔봐 때는 매바다 라시지 매바 그 제반 미셔봐 어떻게 안에 지원은 덴바진배 탄진지 치와서가 덴바 초바진배 진바데 덴바 챙게데 안에 가르래서나 윤전의 가르래서나 규제를 깨와대 된주데 어텐더비 가서래 지원 나와 아니 탄진 그 치와 땜바를 채바 되게 윤전 때주 중화 되니 개코나니라 로제베 개와 오마와 따보라 아니 탄진기 남도기 차와 말려버지고 고르추비 수지 아니 땜베고 땜비 땜바 텐텐더베 땜바데 현지 흉루 가서 땜바 현지 흉루 마동외서 좀된 데래 현비 아니 땜바 현지 치료고 땜바다 소베 치료고 땜바 현지 흉루 마동외 땜바 시기 민당 텐투바데 아니 냐메샤자 생기 주바 천이 주보대 와제라니 생기 줘봐 신도 아니 무디부전 무디 세상라 소와가 덤바 시에줘봐대 전부 처럼 어떻게 찾아마를 되려내요 말이 야
So here then regarding this profound teaching emptiness as dependent origination and dependent origination as emptiness, turning now to the text, yesterday we had left off at verse 6. So here it says that by grasping at it, the childish strengthen bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. And it continues in the next verse saying, since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. Like calling a fox a lion, for a tirthika it would be a word of flattery. So here, for those sort of childish beings of lesser intellect, they grasp onto this idea of intrinsic existence, as things as having some kind of intrinsic or real existence. And so for them, by the power of grasping at that, they grasp at this they're bound by this view of grasping at an extreme of true existence. And so they are unable to understand the meaning of dependent origination properly. For them, if something is existent, it has to be intrinsically existent. And so they are unable to distinguish between something being existent and something being intrinsically existent. And they are also unable to distinguish between something lacking intrinsic existence and being totally non-existent. So unable to distinguish between those, they grasp at true existence. And this only, so their understanding of dependent origination as being truly existent is only strengthening their wrong views, their grasping at extreme kind of views. So these childish beings are then unable to properly understand this. But for those who have expanded their intellect, who are more intelligent, they are able to understand this very teaching is able for them to cut through, without exception, the kind of net of elaborations, proliferations of discursive thought. And so for that very reason, they are able to use this understanding to actually cut through their bondage rather than be tied more strongly by extreme views. And so as this teaching of the Buddha is not seen anywhere else, it's not seen in any other texts, then to give another teacher the name teacher would be sort of like a word of flattery. It wouldn't have any real meaning, like calling a fox a lion. To give a non-Buddhist teacher this title of teacher would merely be a word of flattery. Only the Buddha is a true teacher for having realized correctly this teaching of dependent origination, which is not seen elsewhere.
Oh yeah, 진짜 에마 오시와데 와자비 측체. 에마 덤바 제가 안 차완도 지그 동안이야라 시와기. 아니 타벨라 덤바다. 아니 시바 코와다. 아니 시와 체배냥데스 조지. 아니 지발에 쪄와다. 스시 탈루마기. 뭐 텐다비 스시 탈루마기. 아니 스시 지발에 쪄와다. 아니 때 차부기 대화라 에마 덤바 에마 잡 아니 차부기 대화라 저와서 체기 대화 원도 된다 부 아니 내래 탈발라 저와서 봐 차부기 대화라 저와다 최마와 남지 초대 아니 때 저와 송바기 아니 덤바 예매자시 생겼다 아니 다차 세와 대대인지
So then continuing into the next verse, it says wondrous teacher. So in the Tibetan, emao is a word of like wonder. And so here it says wondrous teacher. And this is because the teacher is the one who teaches the path to liberation, that teaches the path that is able to completely get rid of all of the suffering of pervasive conditioning. This teacher alone is able to lead to that path of freedom. And here the next set of the first line says wondrous refuge. And here this is referring to the Buddha as being a refuge, able to protect from samsara and the extreme of peace. So this protector or refuge is able to protect beings from the sufferings of samsara as well as a kind of solitary peace. And this teacher is able to, this speaker, the teacher, the Buddha, is able to also give temporary and ultimate happiness. So the kind of temporary happiness of gaining higher rebirths and so forth, rebirth in higher realms, as well as the ultimate final goodness of Buddhahood. And so among speakers, among teachers, the Buddha is supreme for having given this teaching on dependent origination. So it says then, I pay homage to that teacher who taught well dependent origination.
Oh yeah, that's the 아니 가서 좀 된데 제제 추코나 좀 된데 코나 때마 초인데 또마 된중게 남지 저위 차와 말려봐 제비出电比出电把的是 아니确实또마现在切吧现在马东为是저위 차와니 된주 그 저와原来된주 그 저와 니난 그 저와是吧？领主个这玩这吧，你那个这玩没了把几笔出，但把的，俺那确实现了嘛，都没事。
So then, to give sort of a summarized meaning of this, the condensed meaning, it says the subject, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, only you are a supreme teacher, because other than you, no one has seen this teaching of how to cut through the web of elaborations, the net of elaborations by this path of dependent origination and emptiness. So only the Buddha taught this way of being able to cut through this net of elaborations, and here this is referring to the elaboration of true existence, grasping at things as being truly existent, as well as the elaborations of duality, of subject and object. And so other than the Buddha, no one else saw this teaching or realized this teaching.
Oh yeah, that 가서는 전자와 도주 간절해서나 태양 대바집에 말을 받더니 된지지 말을 받더니 아니 니모 탐자라 시자와라 소와나신 류를 치신도 뜨먹고라 내주치 스리가라 류지 가자라 류왕게 캬바차데 니모 탐자라 안에 뜨먹 캬바 예장 말을 받더니 니모 탐자라 류를 왕게 추도 내라 윤전 대나 아니 다 가르래 해서는 미매 다시 잡아나 요wan시 다시 잡아나 와나시 전에 미매 구베 다시 게 나완 도바다를 다시 잡아나 왜 나와데 도바다를 데베라 거니 된중리베 아니 단은 다바점지 아니 단데기 아니 로유도 소마 리베 지균전라 때네 아니 대바진베 탄진 키바나 대바진베 탄진 키바나 아니 림지 저와 말려봐 아니 린주지 저와 테네르바 시도 공부하다 때네 아니 니는 그 저와 도바진 거와 이제 키바나 림지 저위 저와 저위 저와나 도바 비신 로바나 메도바 비신 메나 메메 거와다 니 삼바나 밀런 도바다 버레 야
So here, as for the way that one reverses this web or net of elaborations, so it says here that then this ignorance which grasps at true existence, this pervades all of the other afflictive emotions. As it explains in Aryadeva's 400 verses, the way that the body sense power pervades all of the rest of the senses, in that same way, ignorance, this delusion, pervades all of the other afflictive emotions. So that's the kind of situation that we are in, and therefore, in order to turn away this grasping at true existence, we have to apply the proper kind of antidote. And so it gives some examples here. So therefore, like the way that when you have some kind of an eye disease where you see hairs that are falling, by applying a medication to the eye, one is able to get rid of this appearance of falling hairs. So in that way, by having come to an understanding of the logic, the reasoning of dependent origination, that things are dependently designated, one is able to stop this grasping at the extreme of true existence. And by habituating one's mind to that again and again, meditating on this repeatedly, one is able to eventually, sequentially or in stages, reverse this net of elaborations. So it's like if you take away the fuel from a fire, then the fire will die out, the fire will be reversed. Or if you wake up from sleeping, then your dreams will be reversed. You won't have dreams anymore. So like those examples, you can't have a fire without the fuel for that, and you can't have dreams without the basis of sleep. So in that way, if one removes this ignorance or blocks that grasping at true existence, one is able to reverse the sort of grasping that one has.
哦呀，到我大不赢了啊！提醒你就我如是干啦，俺那提醒你谁比去你谁比醒我，提醒你谁比醒我，是吧？提醒你用我的了过我，提醒你去你谁比醒我呀？俺那提醒你是那去你了过过的懂，去提醒你去你，他懂我就不去推他就把的。提醒你是比醒我，去你是比醒我说，俺那点这个这话当，你那个这话他插话样，哦，那我倒呢，你那个这话当，俺那点别看说的这个这话他插话倒当，他那都东北军战机，他那都。俺那让星期东北军战机，俺那地头说工作那时候我吃我当，俺那电话当，俺那就给我吃我了，但那这我电话当没给我吃我了，说我这我带他说，俺那工作那做我是，俺那落了吃我当，啊，经常让星期东北就来，让星期东北就来，让星期这不中啊。是吧？让星期东北过来，让星期东北这位中啊的，俺那就把这个说，脾气没把没行是，有脾气没把那，刚才脾气没把没行是，没是干了，脾气没把样也没有嘛的是，脾气没行个的没了脾气了，当然教过吧，是吧？必须我这里的必须没把没写说当，就没你说了的提醒我，说他光都下班了，你下班了，没人到班了，现在他提成他送过来，就没你说了的提醒我写说当，俺那让星期都被举他来，让星期都被这位接的，俺那当起他来，他都叫我说写说记，俺那送班那些人，啊。
So here, then, like those examples, it says, to the perspective of mind seeing suchness or seeing the Dharmata, although it is totally freed from all proliferations or elaborations, conventionally, for the reason of emptiness, there is the arising of various conventional phenomena, happiness or pleasure and suffering, pleasure and pain and so forth. And so although to the perspective of this realization of suchness or thatness, there is all elaborations it is free from all elaborations. Conventionally speaking, because things are empty, because they lack that kind of intrinsic existence, then there is the arising of all of these various conventional phenomena. And so it says here then, from empty causes, so causes that are empty of inherent existence, then one come forth results that are empty of inherent existence. So here again, where it's saying to the perspective of suchness or thatness, this is referring to having gotten rid of all elaborations of dualistic appearance, all elaborations of things being truly established and so forth. And so although to that there's no sort of elaborations, when we are talking about that conventionally speaking, for the reason of things being empty, there's these arising of pleasure and suffering and so forth. From empty causes come empty results. So like that, from Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, it says without fuel, fire cannot exist. So in that same way, when one awakens from this sleep of ignorance, there can no longer be these kinds of elaborations. So this is hearkening back to the examples that were above, that if one takes away the fuel, there can't be a fire, and if one wakes up, there's no dreaming. And so from empty things, things are thoroughly produced. From emptinesses, there is production then.
Oh yeah. 写说大罗切，你送把他目的接了电用给明码的。讲白了说话，长线嘛都被没都靠光都下班那些，讲白了说话，那电这个名咱们马查。长期给俺那住了在那叫我在开了个的周局，绝对是要把这样没这吧。俺那从到我们给俺那住进来叫我咱们单的是对吧的。俺那天里啊，吃下来对吧？吃下来对吧？单的是对吧？我打开来吃完，这里送把的，这里送把的目的了，没查出当时，但是给咱们就讲呢，对吧？这看着人是他当把但是给咱带了大把怎么的，俺这让些人马准备带了大把咱们送给俺要的，他看见带了大把咱们的。俺那电中给咱们就讲呢，对吧？马往大麦都俺说，俺那他听他的，人做说呢，心都忙没讲啥的，他看给咱去找我讲，人做说呢忙也没忙在的人，俺那找我写了个学习的。俺那真的我告诉他上希望那些看给当的电学的，我们那都退休吧，送着从把没把写的，俺那上面没叫得把他说啊，他听说呢有啊，就送过来的，日做说呢，心都蛮没叫得嘛这是，
So here, then, this is giving examples of this sort of setting of all elaborations. And here, as it said here, then one needs to understand that non-Buddhists, Tirthikas, they don't even have this term of dependently originated. This isn't even a convention among those who are non-Buddhists. Now, there are some, like the Samkhyas, who have an idea of dependent origination, but it's not a correct understanding of dependent origination. They say that like when the result arises, it's from having dissolved into the cause or the nature of the cause. So it's an incorrect kind of understanding of dependent origination for that one non-Buddhist school that actually has this term dependently originated. And then for the lower tenant schools, they only understand dependent origination in a limited way as referring to being dependent upon causes and conditions or being dependent upon parts. They don't fully come to understand in the highest sort of way what dependent origination means in terms of being dependently designated, dependently imputed, and so forth. So here, there are many sort of ways of praising the teacher as unrivaled for this speech of dependent origination. As we saw yesterday in Nagarjuna's root verses on wisdom, the praise that he gives to the Buddha for having taught dependent origination. So he says, I prostrate to those holy utterances of the perfect Buddha who taught dependent arising, and so forth. And there are other of Nagarjuna's treatises on reasoning and logic that have similar kind of homages to the Buddha for having taught dependent origination. So because there are so many examples of that, they're not all written here. So although there are lots of examples, they're not all listed here.
Oh yeah. That 대단 남들 소래 세가라. 다 된다 디자와 셰다 다 디리 가서. 아니 동바 땡중 그 된다. 땡중 동비 된다 숨바 대단. 남들 소래 동바 참미교로 숨바 남 내지도 고고 그래. 내지도 고고 돼서 남들 소래 참 동바 참미교 간데 송어래서나 아니 랑당 도신 오원이 타반제와 르제바 간데 참만 니 되지 탐제는 제 많이 넣었어요. 랑도지 랑다 도신 오 랑자 과람니당 방자 누구니 오대 랑당 도신 오대 대다게 아니 타반제와 르바데 아니 르싱 아니 현라 동바 제바데 참매교都个的话才买酒，我才买酒，我天堂先这样，当把电酒给天堂，当电酒当被天都，俺的七斤马老把送，七斤马老把送把天人，俺的当把才买酒给主接的这把咱年纪都考过来是吧？那么这说了，当把才买酒送把。咱朗读跟呢，他就喜欢那就，那么这个说朗当托进我呢，他当接话这把人上才没就对吧？拿心， 니양 동바 땡중 그 텐다 땡중 땡중 텐도 송배 안에 동바 참미 주고 임바데 내지도 고거데 갑이开죠 체외 우제 생기 진노서 우마다 참만이 어디서 생기 진바 노와나 관난 재배 다 태나신 가서래 우미 중단라 배바가 남들 그바데다 다 파추단에 단라 바게 디소인 바데
징노 코나르베 징노
생기 진바 저 우제 생기 진바
No. So here, then, praising the Buddha as an unrivaled or unmatched teacher for having taught emptiness as dependent origination and dependent origination as emptiness, this is how the Buddha is established as being a valid being according to Nagarjuna and so forth. But that understanding of establishing the Buddha as a valid being for that teaching on emptiness and dependent origination, one should understand that this is the same point as is being made in the Pramanavartaka, the commentary on the Compendium on Valid Cognition, where it is describing the Buddha as being a valid being for having taught properly what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned. So the two first noble truths are things that are to be abandoned, whereas the truth of the path and the truth of cessation are those things to be adopted, to be taken into practice. And this is a path that is unmistaken, that is undeceptive. And so therefore the Buddha is established as a valid being. Now this is the same sort of point that is being made when Nagarjuna and others praise the Buddha as a valid being for having taught emptiness as dependent origination and dependent origination as emptiness. So one should understand this is coming to the same essential point, rather than, and I'm not quite sure on this, but the way that sort of Indian and Tibetan masters are like animals pecking at each other's necks. You shouldn't see it as being like that. There shouldn't be any sort of discrepancy between the reading of what is presented in the middle way kind of text and those on valid cognition. So some Indian and Tibetan masters sort of get into this like pecking at each other rather than understanding that they come to the same intention.
다티 태바 개와 샤바다라 동바 땡중고 텐당 땡중 동비 텐도 송비 다르바 개와 샤바 태바 뭐 르바 개와 샤바다라 동바 땡중도 텐도 초초바니 투여 안벼 공바 타두도 내주당 동바 땡중고 텐도 송주당 아니 대라 초등 아바다 숨은 예배나네 다 되네 다 담보라 대다 마도나 투비 공바 명예제 명예제장세 땡중 동비텐도 텐도 조반에 투비 공바 타도 임바데 내도 되라 대다 마도 동바 땡중 건도 마도나 투비 공바 명예주당 대도나 아니 동바 땡중 건도 나 교육 공바 대라도 니 예배나네 다 담보 대라 판제 취진 로와라 멤벨라도 가자와 땡배님과 동반이 의의 준전 다음에 봐 땡진 저와 중앙송 세자 디임바레 와 편제 취지로 와서를 로와라 지도 편바를 편비 안에 좀 된데 로완남라 안에 멤버데 편비라도 가자와서 편제 취지 로와라 멤벨라도 가와 멤버데 편비라도 가자와게 안에 좀 된데 취주 신예지 숨바 탐제 안에 누자라 편비치도 숨바 세지인자 가자와 댐비님보 동반이 댐비님보 동반이 댐데 동바 댐중 같은도 댐비님보 님보 동반이 나오라 집에 군산 다음에 봐 돈이 나오라 집에 리비자고 댐진 저와 집에 수딩이 아니 동반 주발라세 댐중기 따지 동반 주발라 아니 차와 가와당 차와가이나 땡주이나 아니 땡주이나 차와가와세 가라 동반 많이 배 차와가와 가와 제가 차와 가와서 그래 아니 시대 아니 가서래 최전도 어디가 최전 가를 주고 해나야 아니 대 땡중도 마주바지 초제 마주바 통외 다들 차왕 가와디 치료와래 자 와 자초고 제 란등을 마와당 아니 어디다 란등을 마와당现在你出去让路马诺瓦矿都去把女的，俺那今天的出去南西，今天的去年南西去南去一路接不了水表往给。你当把你等于个从头通话去穷那是，当然也给唐不得水干了，现在出去找完了，那民族干啥的？我有军战是吧？看这的，那边来说干啥哇？我有军战打没把担心这话穷啊的，但长期就当被军战都，俺那看说的，有钱来接我管呐，俺那吃我干哇。让的我嘛把人家举荐来见了，俺那让些就没准备吃嘛，让些就吃完吃个的话，是吧？让些就吃完吃的，举荐来见了，俺那吃完干哇是，让些来见了，让些就当把没白吃完一张，让些就没准备没白吃完一张，吃完干哇是。我嘛我他，现在给俺那其他那个我太太单着一包，俺那单着一包菜嘛没准备一张，没准备的是，小学没准备汤呢汤娃。然后我嘛我他现在第一出去让路马上玩的是，俺那今天带去光把让路其他我行，马上玩其他矿都去把女的今天的去年那些一路了，就把水表往给谁干了，其他那个去他们家，俺那去那些一路了，就把水表，俺那当把电就当被天都通话去穷那是啊。
So here then, following that, we get to the third point of a set of three in the outline, which says the extensive explanation for why this is valid or logical, establishing that. So here it says then establishing that emptiness means dependent origination. One needs to see that this is the sort of final intention of the sage, of the Buddha, and then following that is how he actually taught emptiness as meaning dependent origination and dependent origination as meaning emptiness. So this is the kind of final intention of the Buddha, and then it gets into how he actually taught that. Then the third point is praising this as being supreme. And so the first of these says then that it is divided into 2 points. The first of which is how if one doesn't realize this, if one doesn't realize or see emptiness as meaning dependent origination and vice versa, then one has not found the intention of the Buddha. And secondly, that if one does realize that, then one will easily find the intent of the conqueror or the Buddha. And so here this comes then in the next 4 verses, the first of which is verse 9, and it says, to help heal sentient beings, O benefactor, you have taught the peerless reason to ascertain emptiness, the heart of the teaching. This way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? For you, when one sees emptiness in terms of the meaning of dependent origination, then being devoid of intrinsic existence and possessing valid functions do not contradict. So here, then in the commentary, it first gives a kind of word gloss. So it says, benefactor, this person who works solely for the benefit of beings. You, the Buddha, are like a doctor, a benefactor or doctor for all beings. And in order to benefit them, you gave this teaching of dependent, the essence of this teaching, which is that in order to gain certainty of emptiness, one uses this unmatched or unrivaled reason of dependent origination. So dependent origination is often referred to as the king of reasonings. things for establishing emptiness. And so here, in order to establish things as being empty, there are those non-Buddhists who see this as being contradictory. So they see that there is a contradiction in the pervasion between the thesis to be established and the reason. And then there are others who see that the presence of the sign of dependent origination is not present in the subject of the syllogism that one is arguing. So there are different sort of reasons that people misperceive this as contradictory or as unestablished. And so those who espouse some kind of real, true existence, they see a contradiction between things being dependently originated and lacking intrinsic existence. So they see a contradiction in the pervasion, that what is dependently originated could not lack some kind of intrinsic existence. And then for others, they see they are not able to see this as being unmistaken, and so they think that the sign that if things were to lack intrinsic existence, they could not be posited as dependently originated, and so they see that they believe that the sign is not present in the subject of the syllogism. So that's where they go awry in terms of their understanding. So they see this as being, this would be referring to the part of the verse that says it's unestablished. So how could those types of individuals possibly come to see your system as being unmistaken? And so then it continues. So when one actually engages in an analysis of this system presented by the Buddha, one comes to see, due to the force of investigation, that emptiness means dependent origination. So they come to an understanding of these things not being contradictory or not being not properly established, but rather that they are they make a good argument, a good syllogism. Oh, geez.
Yeah, oh yeah, Pentecost is what I remember. Look at the Dembing, but I'm going to Dameba. Kawatana Madruba Tomati, Chijilu, Segarandum, but the Shandy tea, and it turned in the Chijiralu Maluba, Chita Konto Chibani, Nugumare, Jamden, Chin Namshi Tomba, Tenjun Tendo Towana, Rashi Tomba, the Chajitapa Megashin, said that Tija on my day. Jamden the Chin, Nashi, and it's Chinamji, Yilu, la Jeba Shibiwangi, Yilu Tatu, la Jeba Shibiwangi. 아니 동반이 땡중 그 텐도 사랑시지 동바티니 아니 때나 다바tam지 땡중 그 텐도 통화시 추나 아니 텐다바랑시지 동바당 텐다바랑시지 동장 탄에도 줄레게 우대와당 아니 자치 태바 로와 차와당 차바보당 아니 자제려서 태바了탄에도 자제 태바니 아니 가사 안 지기 롱으로 시지기 된도 명나와 롱어라 라시현다 바라시지 동바샤 조투바당 탄에도 아니 균례당 자제려서나 써와 조투바데 로지기 시지기 된도 아니 명가신 대련 도바 홍마와 남지 아니 라시지 동바샤나 아니 규제를 깨와 쇼메도 규제를 깨와잖아 라시지 깨와 쇼메도 바인자 대련 도바데 시테니 동바다 땡주니가 마인바 강로 마인바 통하나 세 동바다 땡주니가 마인바 다 가서래 싫어왔다 보이나 동바다 땡주니가 마인바 통함 마인바 아니 지보이나 오마와 조지이나 규제를 기회 땡중이开了那样 아라시지 뭐开没了把印象是吧开了多把这西天你东把的等于你个没人把看肉没人把通完呢看啥体给弄完了 아니 동바라 균례지 차와 미루지 라시지 동바 자데가라 아니 균례지 차와 좀 미루 교단 레비나샤 셔발라 라시지 동바 참 미루 바인자 동바라 균례소지 차와 미루지 차장 제와 동미디 아니 라시지 미동와 처외 안도외세 아니 어데 아니 이리 냐무가와당 코와당에 송기냐와 첨부 있기비 안에 다자게 다요한테 동아 시시위터에 세천인 남시 동반에 땡주든데 통화나 랑시진의 동바다 자체타바 미가신 산다마 대잡다 대전잡다 대라 동바 통화데 제라 잡다
So here, then, those that see think that this way of positing dependent origination and emptiness is contradictory or somehow unestablished, it says, well, then how could they possibly comprehend your system, those individuals? So when for you, it says then, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, when one investigates the final sort of nature, the way that things are, from the force of that investigation, one comes to see emptiness and dependent origination as having a single meaning, as meaning the same thing. And so, although ultimately all things are empty of intrinsic existence, conventionally there is the validity of cause and effect, agent and action, and so forth. And so when for one person, to their mind, on the basis of one, or on the foundation of one base, they are able to see that these don't contradict, that for this individual, they see that emptiness here is referring to dependent origination, and dependent origination in terms of things being dependently designated. And so they have realized that all phenomena lack that kind of intrinsic existence. But conventionally, still, they see the validity, the logical correctness of cause and effect, agent and action, and so forth. So when one can have in a single mind and can posit on one basis that these two qualities can be true, that they're actually mutually supportive, not at all contradictory, then they are able to realize the intention of the Buddha, of the victor. So here it then says in verse 11, for you, when one sees emptiness in terms of the meaning of dependent origination, then being devoid of intrinsic existence and possessing valid functions do not contradict. But the opposite of that, whereas if there is the opposite of that, on one single basis, they're unable to posit both emptiness and dependent origination. This individual sees this as not being possible to posit on one single basis, both lacking intrinsic existence and having valid functionality. And so they are unable to see this as the meaning. So for them, if they, so for example, there are those who are non-Buddhists who do not accept dependent origination. So they're not going to accept this at all. They see this as totally unfounded. But then there are those who accept, like we might call them realists, who do accept dependent origination, but not a lack of intrinsic existence. So for them, they can't posit something lacking intrinsic existence and being dependently originated on a single basis. So for them, they're not able to see this as the meaning of emptiness, and therefore, because they're not able to, within emptiness, posit the functionality of cause and effect, the validity of that, and if they posit cause and effect, agent and action, and so forth, then they don't know how to posit emptiness as an emptiness of inherent existence. Then for them, they give rise to a great sort of fault, leading to the lower realms and so forth, falling into this great abyss of extremist views of permanence or annihilation. So for those individuals, they don't know how to, on a single basis, posit it as being empty, as lacking intrinsic existence, and having valid functionality.
오야 다 된다 와대라 가서 아무가 와서 돼 동바다 된주니가 많이 받아 아니 가로 많이 받 토나 아니 냠가와 코와당 송그 집이 담보대 아니 채달을 놓아다 직 다달을 놓아 다디 다家给他有样对弄啊写写我他天呢突发上节就点的去见钱呢等这天你当班主把了안에 댄중의 다제 안에 치다나 그 최남 동반 주발라 안에 가와당 차와 가와당 댄중라 안에 가서 동반 마인바게 차와 가와당 치다나 그 최남 댄데 마인베 마주와 마와 남지 안에 가와다 마주와 남지 최지 대비니 뭐 동반 마인데서 어텐다와게 안에 치료와당 란도 와마라 소와 대남지 차와 가와다 마주와 남지 최지 대비님보 아니 또봐 마인데 최니 또봐 댄중 같은 데 토나 좀 된데 최니 또봐 댄중 같은 데 토나 아니 조직이랑 엄마라 땜바탕 요 조직이랑 엄마라 땜바탕 코라 초월체바 조직이랑 다제 그 탄유단 차바기 엄밀라라 땜바탕 또봐 댄중 같은 데 마조나 안에 다제 그 따바 양도 통화 야나 채달을 놓아 야나 따달을 놓아 로 때는 매바다나 채달을 놓아다 라시지 주와다나 따대들 따달을 놓아 다제지 용 다제지 양도 놓아写我
So here then, for someone who is unable to understand this reason of dependent origination as establishing emptiness, they either see that there is, or think that there is some kind of contradiction between the pervasion within the syllogism, or they see, or they don't even accept things as being dependently originated at all. So for those, they are going to fall into a grave extreme of not being able to either posit any existence whatsoever, or not being able to have the functionality of cause and effect. So here they fall into a extreme view. So if one whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, nor emptiness in what has functions, one falls into a dreadful abyss, you maintain. So this is the 12th verse. And then as for the summarized meaning of that, it says here then the subject, the Buddha, the Bhagavan, the sage, if one does not realize as the heart of your teachings that emptiness is established as the meaning of dependent origination. So if you either see this as having some sort of contradiction in it, either you're not able to understand how there could be a functionality within a lack of intrinsic existence, as like those lower Buddhist tenant schools who accept dependent origination but not a lack of intrinsic existence, or one sees this as not established whatsoever, like those non-Buddhists who don't believe in dependent origination. Either way, if one does not see that, then one falls into this abyss of either a view of permanence or a view of annihilation. Whereas if one does see emptiness as meaning dependent origination, then one is relying upon the path of the middle way, which leads to freedom. But if one is unable to see it that way, see that emptiness is referring to dependent origination and dependent origination to emptiness, then one either falls into a view of annihilation, this sort of abyss of annihilation, where you think that there is utter non-existence, or a kind of abyss of permanence, of eternalism, where you think that everything has an intrinsic existence.
Oh yeah, that is it. 他洗把做那说，他嘛洗把做完七八这些呢，但有的让些就当把准备军山大面把因被军山开始是呢，他隔壁带那大把咱们，带那出把们，带那大把咱们，带那出把们，俺举家先了啥来吧。 가서 샹라라 봐도 되는 주와 집어체 샹라라 되는 주바다 강라 되면도 주바 니워데 남자 용자래 되는 주바 남자라 키나 아니 되면 용지 주고래 되면 남자 키나 아니 가서래 되는 주바 용지를 주고래 대신도 샹라라 말레바 남자라 키나 아니 샹라라 레바지 용지를 주고와 是吧？先了让来吧，去呢，先了让马来吧，用起了出国吧。现在对呢，出吧当，看了对面的出兵，出吧呢，南家用家就过呢，我搞的，我可能我是搞的，但让些去出吧一呢，先看了呀，对面的出吧，先看了呀，让马来吧，用过的。 是吧？大家可是我们刚才我这个说啊，怎么弄的嘛，差不多。刚才就这么看了，先看了呀，对面的出包，先看了呀，是让嘛来把出包使用过的，这个话人看着人啥呢？俺那些这问题吧，让这俺到这吧给，这让大姐话呢，看是先了让嘛来边我让心的，是先了让嘛来边我让心的，得看啥给大都出不出？ 让些的准备出菜，先说他们准备吃了，是我的人。人家先来让马来吧，可以咱把让来吧出过来，先来让来吧，你的咱把先来让马来吧的去过来，可能咱咱家用钱，先说给他们准备吃了，是呀。
So, here then, to lay this out in more detail, here, this reason of dependent origination is the sort of peerless, unrivaled reason for establishing emptiness as lacking in intrinsic existence. So dependent origination is the unrivaled, the best reason for establishing that things are empty of some kind of intrinsic existence. So these two options of something being established contingently, so here again, when we're referring to dependent origination, this is things being dependently designated or imputed, contingently existent upon one another. So a contingent type of establishment or existence, and having a type of existence where you are not reliant or contingent upon anything else, these two are a mutually exclusive pair. So if you establish that something is contingent or dependent upon other things, then that eliminates completely the possibility that it has some kind of non-contingent, non-dependent kind of existence. So here, I don't know the good English terms for namche and yongche, but it's like when you eliminate one, you establish the other, and by establishing one, you eliminate the other. So this is a mutually exclusive pair of options. If something has an existence which is non-contingent, doesn't have to rely upon anything, then one establishes that that thing is non-contingent. There's no way that it could be contingent and non-contingent. These are, again, mutually exclusive opposites. So here they are in direct opposition to each other by being mutually exclusive. And so if something is inherently or intrinsically established, then it is necessary that it is established as non-contingent, non-dependent upon anything whatsoever. So as we saw in the last class, at the point of identifying the object of negation, this same quote of Chandrakirti from his commentary on Aryadeva's 400 verses came up, where he was identifying what is meant by self in terms of coming to realize selflessness. And so here, the definition of self is some kind of a nature of an object which is not dependent upon anything else. That is the self that is to be negated or eliminated. So here, there are many texts texts that establish this, but for our understanding here, we should recognize that the measure of true existence, of existence that is intrinsic or inherent, is to have some sort of nature or character which does not have to rely upon anything else. And when you establish that something is reliant upon other things, it completely eliminates the possibility of having that kind of non-contingent existence.
Oh yeah, that thing again. The Shishitawa in Dang, Gawatani Matuba, say Tiki. Ani Randonga Namji. Ani Tende de Ketubala Chawa Gavi Tasteba in this Katare. There are Tenji Trua, Tenji Travaina, Ranshi Jitu. Remember my Bechawa. Rashi Chua Chawa to go in town. One of the Tendela, Tende to la Chawaka with Tasso Yedi, Chendo Santa Basunga, Tendela, Denduji Chawa Deba in them, Denduga Chawa Deba said. Denji Deva in the Dendu by Chawa Deva. Sometimes Denduji Channel, Dendu Debare, Dendu Debare, Denduji Channel, Gujana Dendela, Anobo Yango. Dendu Deba Chawa Deba said, Chawan Deba said, Santa Bay, Denduji Channel, Dendu Deba in the Sagana Teneta, Jum Den Deji. Kolo Papi Gaso, Sunanamji Party, Tamja, and the Ranga Tanji Madruam, Damba Madruam, or Sumbate, and it died, Rashi to Kalam, Rashi by Mayimba, Tekomba Shendu Taco, Komba Shendu Tata, the Canadian, and a castle. Catching on your Mebanita, Jong on your Mebanita, turned among on your Mebanila Gone. Ani Jamdeji, go Jamden the rank of combatani. Ani Casore, Cola Bible Castle soon and Namji Baji Chetam Jamoni, Basum Bade, Sending Zinza, Gasung Dua, Chernam Dendi, Senza Betendi, Shannon, the Javandi, Jong, when you may be Tenshi. Shawan Demba Meba, I say, Shawan Demba Meba Tawa, I say, Jong, when you be Tenshi, Shawan Demba Meba Tawa de, and it's Henry Sungala Kunde. 이상 체질 순간에 군대 회사에서는 샤완 demba mena 아니 샤완 메고 아니 샤완 메나 샤완 같은 그 용주 잡마고 이데 메고 아니 군다야 메고 와 이제 체질 순간에 군대를 줘 그래叫我你别谦虚噻叫我你没把噻的샤완叫我你没把군다 체질我你没把 아니 용주 전담 원이 매봐 세대 어 계속나 공원에 아니 손에 남자가 바지 치어 담제 아랑 그 천이 마주送바래 다送바래 만도 아니 저 원이 매봐 이나 아니 샤완 저 원이 매나 대비 저 매나 아니 샤완 매고래 샤완 매나 샤완을 군대 수도그래 샤완 매나 아니 샤완 같은 그 천이 용성고 말해 아니 용주라 군대 저그래 아니 샤완라 군다 drotabe 군다야 메고래 아니 군다래야 군데서 저그래 세가라 오다 저왕 원님이 배 천시 샤완 내가 메봤다나 천시 순간라 군데서 좋았어 야야 대바지 주자 탄이 bon주스나 론도지 타당 군도지 타 론도지 타 샤완 내가 좋아 샤완 안에 가르르서나 란지 도비 셰치란 그 천이 좋아 that's what I'm gonna. 아니 군대지 다 샤완 demba 마주바 랑그 천이지 마주바 오탄이 대본주대 아니 가서 도저 본저고 공반 지위기 공저게 단지 통매지 제비 차사당 아니 누가서라 제다 송바데 아니 루르 타입 셔서 아고서
얘는 샤완 demba 주바래 그봐 혼자 디켈레
점점 빌라 샤완 demba 주바 샤완 demba 마주바 따나 군데
아니 돈도기
돈도기 샤완한테 도비 현실한 그 천이 좋아서 그래 다들 lâm 상대에서 가보여 가지고 샤완 치료 튼도 주바 양은 내야지 샤완 치료 튼도 주바虽然说这边천이虽然说这边천이란 그 천이 주 제타도 주바 치료 튼도 주바这种的 아니 지당 강사가 다도 좋아데 좋아집에 좀바데 전도로와 수다 수준비 참아라 아니 자타도 좋아집에 좀바데 전도 수치로도 좋아집에 좀바데야 전도 야
Okay.
아니 아주 아니 마신 알 도와다시
Okay, sorry, my understanding is limited. So here, then again, as it says in Chandrakirti's commentary on the 400 verses, that if something had a nature, if there was a nature of an object that was not reliant upon anything else, then that would be like a self, and that is what is being negated here in this object of negation. So here, it says that in our own school, so there are those who are sort of like realists, you could say, and they say that there is sort of a contradiction in the pervasion of establishing a dependent origination, establishing this sign of dependent origination, because for them, dependent origination is truly existent. So you can't have this kind of syllogism where it uses dependent origination in order to be the sign disproving true existence or existence by means of its own characteristics. So these other schools, they take the second turning of the wheel, including the Heart Sutra and so forth. These teachings of the Buddha, they take as something that cannot be interpreted literally. We can't take them as the words say, because they have to assert some kind of true or intrinsic existence in order to posit their system. So for the Great Exposition School, the Sutra School, and the Mind Only School, they assert that what is dependently originated is necessarily truly established. So for them, they can't assert a syllogism which says that things are not all phenomena are not truly established because they are dependently originated, because then there would be this contradiction in the pervasion. They would not believe that things that are not truly established could be dependently originated. There would be some sort of contradiction there. So if one were to try to make that sort of syllogism for them, they couldn't accept that. So they have to take the second turning of the wheel as it's presented in the Sutra Unraveling the Thought, the way that the Sutra Unraveling the Thought breaks down the three wheels. They would say that the second wheel needs, turning of the wheel needs some kind of interpretation, because we can't understand that things are not truly existent or don't have some sort of inherent intrinsic existence. So okay, so then getting to the Mind Only School here asserts that that all phenomena which are dependently originated are truly established. And so for them, if there was an illustration, some kind of a basis which lacked an essence of production, then that would mean that the view of other powered phenomena, so the other powered nature, would not be truly established, and that would actually be disparaging or deprecating to their presentation of the three natures, to all three of the natures. So if this other powered nature, things which are dependently originated and depend upon others for their existence, if that other powered nature was not truly existent, then the thoroughly established nature could not be posited. So the emptiness of that thing could not be posited. And it would also be sort of deprecating to this view of things as being other powered. We wouldn't be able to establish them as being other powered. So here it says then that if you had some kind of lack of true existence, if there were no truly existent other powered nature, then this would be deprecating to their view of the three natures. You wouldn't be able to posit either the other powered nature or the thoroughly established nature, the emptiness of that. So here it says then that the way that they, these mind-only school, go about abandoning the two extremes. And so here the two extremes are the extreme of sort of reification and the extreme of deprecation. So one can know from the way it's presented, there are infinite sort of scriptures and reasonings spoken in the Bodhisattva grounds and so forth that establish that if they didn't accept some kind of truly existent other powered nature, that would then fall into the view of deprecation. And for them, if the imputed nature were to be accepted as truly existent, then that would be a view of reification. So for them, the extreme of reification would be to assert that there is some sort of substantially existent external object separate from the valid cognition realizing it. And so for them, then they have to assert that these are truly existent. Otherwise, they would end up that the other powered nature and the thoroughly established nature are truly existent. Otherwise, one would fall into the extreme of deprecation, and for them, then it will come below how one would fall into the extreme of reification.
Oh, yeah. That that in town, some buggy, and a Chinese sum Zenicana, and a Shawanda Yondu Gundas. Shawanda Yondu, Shawan, Eugene Java, Yondu Zenicana, and the Tombani de Gore. And Namda Lam Jimmy Batadu, Namda Lam, Tony Mosun to be seen. And you Gunda Tobatasam. 第哪呢？俺那小王当用住你我得让个钱你出吧，点把出吧，突然打把出吧，让钱你出吧，滚蛋，突然打把没出吧，点把没吧，我打都是这个点把没吧，你让滚蛋点把没出吧开两百，谁干了？滚蛋点把没出吧开200。 单这一大级，滚到去钱，单这两把没得，单这一百去搞吧，真的，单这一大级，滚到让西面把中那，两把没把让西面把中那，这里吃瓦样搞瓦的，是吧？单这一呢，俺那身上比对起来几个吃个的话，对起来就把单这个吃了一张，单这里现在让西就没住吧，没一百吃瓦一张，几吃瓦样搞瓦，开来了是。 아니 군다 댄데도야 칼랭가 말해서 군다 규제를 기박해 말래 뭐야 군다 댄데도야 칼 말래 군다 댄데 뭐 규제를 기박 댄데 탄녀도 칼래 봐야자 아니다 댄데를 규제를 기박 거와 인자 군다 댄데도야 칼 말래 봐我什么都行吧参与送给哪呢？希望当用住电把出吧，俺那滚蛋上给参与嘛出吧，电把买吧。就是这参与送了，电把也没切把啥瓦切。那多这个举件电这几圈那么，俺那让咱的电住电把的，多这个给电举件来接我当，他切我当，让咱的电住看不见，全几对电把一张。 我这个举件电这几圈那么，让咱的电住的电把一把的，俺那他，那么这个告诉希望那些，团他们听见你话个弟弟团到原把人是，团他们听见你话的，路的啦，俺那团到原把人是，团他们团没缺钱呢。 俺那工作单把的是，团他们团闲的是，团他们团就把美女比缺闲的工作单把的，在这让去参加工作单把了，让跟参加的几参加去，团他们团进入吧，让咱的团单把，团他们团进每天把几天的工作单把写白，是大体都有了。 俺那团他们的工作得做真的是，
因为군다 디 덴바 마두바레 군다
군다 덴바 메바 삼삼을 눌라 덴바 메바 란자지 마두바 小王的永驻点把约吧，让在一处吧。
So here, then, according to the mind-only school, they have this presentation of the three natures. So there is that which is the other-powered nature or dependent nature. And so here, this is referring to cause and effect, things that arise based upon causes. And then they have the thoroughly established nature. This is referring to the emptiness of things, the pure path that leads to liberation. So for them, they assert that these two natures, the other-powered nature and the thoroughly established nature, are ultimately existent, are existent by means of their own characteristics, and are truly established. Whereas the imputed nature, and this is referring to the things that are conceptual imputations, this then is not said to be truly established or established by means of its own characteristics. So here they have to make this distinction between the other-powered nature and the thoroughly established nature, and then this imputed nature. So here it says then, if one accepts that the imputed is not truly existent, then by the reasoning, by the sign of dependent origination, if one establishes that the imputed lacks intrinsic existence, then generally there would be a problem, a contradiction in the pervasion. So therefore, the mind-only school accepts that the imputed is not truly existent, and they also say that it is not dependently originated, that the imputed natures are not dependent originations, because otherwise, if they were to do that, then they would have to be truly established by means of their own characteristics, and this would lead to internal contradictions in their system. So for the mind-only school then, the other-powered and the thoroughly established natures are ultimately existent, are truly existent, are existent by means of their own characteristics. But imputed natures are not truly existent, and they are not existent by means of their own characteristics. That's how they have to set up their system. So then, turning to the Sutra school, they claim that phenomena which are dependently originated, which arise from causes and conditions, are truly established and are established by means of their own characteristics. So for them, that which is dependently originated is truly established. So as we saw yesterday from the Pramanavartika, from the commentary on the Compendium on Valid Cognition, whatever is able to ultimately perform a function, then that exists ultimately. So for them, an ultimate truth is that which is able to perform a function, carry out a function. And all other phenomena are established as being conventionally existent. And so those are explained as being a generality or a general characteristic, as a generally characterized phenomena, as opposed to a specifically characterized phenomena. And so whatever is able to carry out a function ultimately is truly ultimate and established by means of its own characteristics. And that which is unable to carry out a function is a generally characterized and explained as being a conventionally existent, as a conventional truth. So according to, again, this Sutra school, those things that are able to carry out a function are ultimately existent, and anything that is not able to carry out a function is asserted to be a conventional truth or an obscurational truth.
Oh yeah, that's the sense to do that. Ni da ka so do de ta chira ma wa ge ani thisu na so wa du che ta ani na ga lang anu so so ta go da mi ju ko ba la so wa ani du ma che 아니 대다양 아니 제주도 되봐 당원 받자라 봐 전화라 나 시전에 아니 시와 차고래 해서 대체 나 되게 란데기 란데 너대와다 체라마와다 산자바기 대이도 주듯이 될때라 아니 규제는 지금 그 차와 가와데 다 두스 좋아체 다 현대 남라 마주와 줘야 돼 현대 남라 땡데데 마주 다스돼 버려서 다 치다나 공원에 대밤에 땡데 이비시세나 아니 땡데 저와 좋아 캐멜레 바인자 마주 다스돼 버리데 대다기 최전 영어 강이야 땡데 마인 바 되발되라 대라 시다지 대와 메베스 最西当大了，这玩意儿嘛的是，最西的那等着看没人把这西大几这玩意儿了，嘛准备等这些参谋玩意儿了，差不些的是，这样人的等着几天对吧了？按照他以前来结吧，让那年来结吧，让那天几千说。越来越为，这不这下吧，穷啊起来，按照他我们给单独就单地的这不这下吧，穷啊起得怪了是，目的不拿呢，上班给你，我他就就没来穷啊开了个的，就没把我你来穷啊得了是。按照他往就把给老爷要穷完了，就来穷嘛，往就给老爷来穷啊，对吧？长白讲长白，其他那个我在那长白切完了在那穷啊，我长白切出他那做把去的。참 주게 장 관대니가 참 주 코랑기 참 주기 안我시와당 시위 연대도 과단이 어디 시와당 시위 연대도 돼 대다라 추다 지난에 초도 교화대 규제开了个 场景是吧场景给대다라 초도 주와场景기 내부대 안에 랑그 기도수 야 봐 지조具体打，那个打了计划开了把一张，这不让县级别让县来解释去找了计划开了把一张，俺呢让县级啊都特别出去去把对吧说，就那经常说七级劳动嘛，把些都打的那个广东协助的人这个我们宁波他多个把人拿来先去送下来，对吧？把些都人车上。桥浪当车站了说吧，朋友开话他们送不起了，但是我让这个，俺那等着开没人不就真的，他是现在给，现在给到现在开没人不就真的。
OK。
现在的话，别人嘛去江边呢送的，问他哦。
Okay, so here then. So that gives a presentation of the Sutra School and the Mind Only School. So now for the Great Exposition School, or the Vaibhashikas, they assert that all compounded that the three times are compounded objects, and that all phenomena, all uncompounded phenomena, such as uncompounded space and so forth, and cessations, each of these is actually posited as being substantially existent. So the way that they posit all phenomena, uncompounded and compounded phenomena, as being substantially existent, one can know from the Compendium of Higher Knowledge and so forth by Vasubandhu. So then this is the presentation given by the various Buddhist tenet holders who accept things as being dependently originated, even if it's only in a limited sense. Those are the kinds of things that they posit. And as far as the non-Buddhist schools, so we should know that they are unable to establish dependent origination. They don't see this as being a valid kind of a supposition, because for them, things are not dependently originated. They don't have this as a term within their sort of reasoning. So whatever object there is, they assert that this is not dependently originated. And so for them, there is then no sort of connection between the sign. So if you were to take like the syllogism, this subject, all inner and outer phenomena are not truly established or are not intrinsically established because they are dependently originated. For them, they don't accept the presence of the sign being dependently originated in the subject, all inner and outer phenomena. So for them, they're unable to, there's no connection then between the basis that they're trying to establish the sign on. And so the sign, if that is not established, then there's no way that they can have a valid cognition of that particular syllogism. So here, then, there are those within our own schools that assert as the meaning of dependent origination that a suitable cause gives rise to a suitable kind of result. And so in order to posit dependent origination, even in the sort of limited way as is done by the lower tenet holders of the Buddhist schools, one has to assert that there is this dependent origination whereby a suitable kind of cause, that there are causes and conditions such that a cause gives rise to a suitable result, and there is a connection between those. Now, for most of the non-Buddhist schools that are going to be listed below, they do not actually accept dependent origination at all. So if you take the hedonists, they say that all things arise causelessly. They have this sort of nature from which they arise, but they don't depend upon any sort of causes. So for the Kyangpenpas or the hedonists, they say that things arise causelessly. Now, for those who are proponents of Ishvara, of some sort of like creator God, they say that everything, all is asserted to come from the movement of Ishvara's mind. So for them, there's no sort of like a suitable cause leading to a suitable effect. It's all Ishvara's mind moving around. And then for those who assert are proponents of Brahma, they assert that Brahma creates all of the varieties of phenomena within the world. So it's all a creation of Brahma. And similarly, the Vaishnavites, so those who propitiate Vishnu, they say that both samsara and nirvana are merely the nature of Vishnu. So the peace and the qualities of peace are asserted to be Vishnu himself. And so those are the kind of non-Buddhists that really don't accept cause and effect. And slightly superior to that are the Samkhyas, who do assert that there is a result that arises from the sort of nature of itself. So the way that they assert cause and effect is that there is a kind of like dissolution. The cause dissolves into its nature, and that leads to the arising of the effect. It's kind of it's in a mistaken way of understanding. It's a mistaken presentation of cause and effect, and so they're really all of these that are listed above are mistaken in terms of what they are saying. And we can know this because there are many different Indian masters and so forth, including Bhavaviveka in his Heart of the Middle Way and Blaze of Reasoning and so forth, as well as Dignaga and Dharmakirti and many Indian masters who have refuted this or explained this in their teachings.
Oh yeah. 단지니 다 란주바기 최단지 대마메 바샤지 시와체 그래서 아니 대양 란주비메 대마메 바샤지 시양 아니 랑원의 주와당 아니 란전지 주와 샤지 시바 임바데 이와 랑원의 주바 샤지 시바 인장 다 가서를 아니 도배 다점 시리간라 다 도배 다점 샤지 시다 메시 아니 좋다는 대주开说起他们这有啊是吧多半大众这个了多半大众下去没写吧当多半大众下去没写是干了安卡说的让人的主下去写吧人家多半大众下去没写吧这个 然后多半大这么是一个落日怕大巴当，咱们去车外等住接呢。然后呢，出把马接吧，那有情况呢，就赛出把人，多半也怕大；有情况呢，就赛出把你有把人，在多半大这么大，然后呢，出把先干，你之前，那多半大这么先干这个，当刚才多半大这么先干的原因呢，多半怕大这么人。多半怕大把怎么样？多半大怎么样？多半怕大把怎么样？是吧？他感觉多半大怎么样？多半怕大怎么？这个都写给人了。而且他让这边多半大是开卖的吧？我说，多半大怎么怕大几块钱呢？多半大怎么？多半大怎么生干的？有人呢，种菜的。好多人呢，有情况呢，种菜怎么把人在多半怕大吧？还是多半大怎么的？人家多半怕大怎么没得生干说人家看见他，他说的多半大怎么这个这么这就当的了，差点给开发写给我的，人家他。
Some.
多半大把咱们些个咱们这去，
Not that hard, right?
咱们这个这当给，俺们这个开发线嘛，都全他去把人把的是吧？人家他就路了，咱就个天。带来给我当带来大把你些呗，是的，或者当然，然后就路了，人家他多半大怎么呢？多半大怎么讲？俺那然后呢，多半大怎么也把然后呢出把这干下去。是吧？然后呢，就把干下买一把钱，多半怕大，有情况呢，种菜就把看上个这一个，让就来了，就没得行，对吧？看说有情况那样，俺你就没得行，大浪都拿就干了，大浪给顶都，俺你大浪都拿去给俺再给你把这买那大浪都没拿完那些钱呢。完了，大浪给那，假设大电信给顶住，大浪拿些钱，再给另外的月，俺你没些落出我几单钱啊？俺你假设的电信大浪都拿我钱，拿些他白了钱呢？俺你有情况呢，就在这乐业派，就在大瓦，他得送我的。是吧？你这多半大是开来生，他多半大怎么了？咱们这两个人主要去开价吧钱呢？俺让就被多半大是写给我们的，然后是吧？人家让就被两把买把下去写，两个人主把下去写，让咱就主把下去写。那你两把主啊，杨大把主啊，西路是主啊，团大把主啊，在那下写给我们的。
No. So here then it continues saying, well, furthermore, in the consequentialist system, the meaning of dependent origination is explained as meaning these two, that things are produced or generated, arise in dependence, and they are designated in dependence. So for the consequentialist school, they say that things are merely designated by mind. They say that there is nothing from the side of the object. There's no establishment from the side of the object. So things are merely posited by mind or designated by mind. And that is the way that they understand things as being dependently originated. There's not even the slightest sort of existence from the side of the object, but things are only designated. There's no sort of existence from the side of the object, existence by means of its own characteristics and so forth. So for them, that is what they understand it to mean when they say that things are merely designated by mind. So in this way of saying it, this word just or merely is very important in terms of their understanding. And although the autonomy school often uses this phrase of being, and if they do say merely designated by mind, they still have this sense, they usually say that things are designated by mind, because for them there has to be some sort of existence from the side of the object. So there's a little bit coming from the side of the object, and then there is the power of the mind designating it. But one has to have those two components. You can't have things being merely designated by mind. For them, that would lead into sort of an annihilationist kind of view. They assert that there has to be some sort of thing, some sort of existence from the side of the object, and the mind designating or imputing it, and that is the way that they understand this. So we saw this in the last class with the example of an illusory horse or elephant or whatever. They use this as an example of the way that things are empty. So in this, or the way that they appear. So in this example, there has to be, in order to conjure up an illusory elephant, for example, you have to have like a stick or a stone, something that has had mantras recited on it, that is then the basis. So there's some sort of object base. And then there is the diluted perception of those who are watching this illusion. And those two things coming together lead to the appearance of this illusory elephant. You have to have something from the side of the object and something from the side of the perceiver in order to have this illusory elephant. Now, so for them, they would say that things are existent by means of their own characteristics. They have some kind of intrinsic existence, but they deny that things are ultimately existent or that they have true existence. So for them, they make a distinction between things being truly existent and intrinsically existent or existent by means of their own characteristics. Those are not the same things according to the autonomy school. But for the consequentialists, they would say that something being intrinsically existent, being truly existent, these are all sort of like synonyms for the same kind of existence, denoting some sort of existence from the side of the object without having to rely upon anything else for its existence. And so they do not accept that there is even some slight bit of existence from the side of the object or establishment from the side of the object. So although the autonomy school and the consequentialist school may well use the same phrase that things are merely designated by mind, that mirror is very important for distinguishing the understanding that comes with the consequentialist school from that of the autonomy school.
Oh yeah, that tanju like kandere sana tian tanju la ani oh tanju guten tene jewa dang tene tawa ni shebe tene jewa de ta mo ma ya de go wa ni sheba di gun zhen zhen de me ba de tanju ni tene da bi tanji tene da ba zam ji tanji是吧哦tene da ba zam ji tanji是我觉得什么的，但那大比等着你啦，但那大比出的，俺那看着嘞，是那的，哦，大西的了，但呢，俺那多这个多呗，俺那有的了，俺那七八卡说了，大学才谈的大哇，别那碰比多啊，碰把了对呢，俺那盐辣汤，多可能给吃下来对呢，盐辣建议吧。是吧？碰把了对的盐辣汤，多可能给吃下来对的盐辣，俺那建议吧，盐巴少多呢，俺那盐辣汤盐辣煎汤，俺那就当这不。哦，你让盐辣汤盐辣煎的盐辣了点了盐辣汤，盐辣点了盐辣煎汤，盐辣煎了点了盐辣甚至点了小哈。有了点呢，这不当，这不了点呢，就是些，俺那点呢这小吧，是吧？俺那提前都下了点呢，弄他下弄当，人都说他们家俺那盘子点呢，大把咱们点呢，对住咱们点呢，俺那大把咱们也是的。你怎么着家中？盘子点呢，大把咱们点呢，大把咱们的，俺那他闽江的是闽江的写的是，他闽的大把咱了马到有种呢，总是讲没吧？闽咱们的咱们都俺那要把人讲，闽江都写的，出的去他们家了，俺那闽江大学当中，闽的怕大把咱们的约的，俺那有种呢，总是讲没把人讲。是吧？怕 펜지 차샤 초밤 예라 초밤 어딘지 아니 같이 초바 어딘지 라떼네 아니 다 가서래 민기 팔았다 땅바텀도 여지 라도 주바자네 매바인장 아니 치다나 그 치다 저 민장 다여 잠만도 자유자네 개는 거 말이
제 말이
야
So here, then again, the understanding of the consequentialist school within that system, the meaning of dependent origination is explained as these two, arising independence as well as being designated independence. So the other lower tenant schools accept this kind of arising independence, production independence, but it is this logical reasoning of being dependently designated that is really explained to be the sort of peerless, unrivaled reason for establishing this. So here, when it's saying that dependent origination is explained as being this unrivaled reasoning for establishing something, as in logically, it's referring here to this very sort of syllogism or logical proof of being dependently designated. So as for the way that things are designated in dependence, we could take, for example, a vase, and the neck of the vase, or the neck of this vase is dependent upon, is a part that is reliant or contingent upon the vase. And so it is contingent upon the parts. So you can't have a part and one that has parts is separate from each other. They are contingently designated or mutually dependent. So relying upon its own parts means that something has parts. And so in brief, this distinguishing things into that which is a part or a branch of something and that which has parts or has branches, as well as designating cause and effect, designating east and west, long and short, and so forth. All of these have this mutually dependent contingency. They are merely designated in this contingent way, or merely designated in this dependent way. So they are explained as being only names. And so in that way, all phenomena are designated as being name only. So here, this act of, we should know that all phenomena are like this, that they are designated in dependence. So when you have parts in a whole, you have earlier and latter moments and so forth, there's no sort of autonomous existence from the side of an object that precludes that designation. The designation is what, the designation is crucial for actually determining its establishment. So things are only established as designated. There's no way that there can be some kind of existence from the side of the object without that process of designating on a basis of designation. So here again, this level of contingency is referring to the act of designating and the basis of designation as being mutually contingent.
Yeah, that one that's how she no. 西北野出现麦罗当日绕人新年的讲，上街行都没得不瓦也，多可能的先拉车吧，一当古主人那面着的港内呀大爷没。